The KTM 500 EXC is basically legendary at this point. Whether you're an enduro god or you just want an ultralight ADV bike, the 500 is such a hard package to walk away from. Heaps of power, fantastic suspension, and stupidly light considering that it is 500cc. But it isn't all fantastic, and in this video I wanted to discuss KTM's massively missed opportunity with the KTM 500 EXC. Now, before you come at me with pitchforks, I'm not talking about scrapping the current 500 EXC-F. I think that is fantastic as is and is a perfect product fit. But what I think would be additionally amazing would be to take the 500 EXC-F and do a few little modifications and turn it into a premium dual sport motorcycle that is ultra light. Imagine an EXC-F with all the great things about the EXC, the stupidly lightweight, the high performance suspension, the fantastic components on it, and decent power, but you don't have to service it measured in hours, and you don't have to do top end rebuilds as frequently and saving yourself a whole pile of money. I think that would be a really tantalizing option for a lot of people. And I came to this conclusion when I was looking for my new dual sport. I'd had a WR250R, I'd also had a DRZ 400, and the problem is moving from those motorcycles, there is nothing lighter and with more premium components on it available in the dual sport world. There isn't a premium dual sport to look to upgrade from while still staying in the dual sport ecosystem. So what would KTM need to do taking their enduro bike, the 500 EXC-F, or for that matter the 350 if you don't want the power of the 500? Well, first off, I think it needs to be a separate model. I think it would be a real disservice to all enduro riders to complain about these problems when these problems are what make it fantastic as a ready-to-race motorcycle. So this needs to be its own separate thing. And I think the biggest thing that they need to focus on is making that clear. So call this the KTM EXC-D, something that really signifies, hey guys, this is a premium dual sport, not an enduro, so that everyone in the market is clear about what the bike is supposed to do. The first mechanical change that I would make is make that 6th gear a real overdrive gear. Now the KTMs aren't too bad, but they're not the best when you're out on the highway, of course. So I think turning that 6th gear into even more of an overdrive gear to hold those higher speeds comfortably for long amounts of time, because let's face it, most dual sport riders were doing at least 30 minutes to an hour on the highway to get to the dirt. I think the next addition would be a cush drive rear hub, just to reduce the stress on the drivetrain, especially on the road conditions. I think it really would help the longevity of the motorcycle and probably help a little bit of the comfort too, reducing some of the snappiness and vibrations when you're changing gears. And of course, we've got the service intervals. No! So that's probably the big one. However they want to go about that, I'm not too fussed. They could increase the oil capacity by changing the engine casings. They could also drop the power down a little bit, not too much obviously, because we want some performance out of this bike. Maybe change some of the components to a little more durable components. Now that racing isn't the major factor, they could probably use some components for longevity instead of performance. However they want to do it, I think if they can increase the reliability and the duration between having to service these motorcycles, it would put them at the apex of the premium dual sport market. The last thing I'd like to see is a rear subframe dedicated to being able to carry a little bit of luggage. It doesn't have to be an absolute bomb-proof one that weighs a metric ton, just a little bit of a subframe so that you can strap your bags there and be confident that you're not going to leave the rear fender of your bike down the trail when you're packed up with luggage. Now, of course, there's ways to circumvent that with the current EXC setup, but it's just a nice to have feature. I can hear the grumpy internet trolls from here grinding their teeth and pointing out many flaws in my argument. People are going to point out that the KTM 690 Enduro R already exists and is a fantastic motorcycle. And I'd say yes, but with some caveats. One is it's a bit too heavy for anyone that wants a truly lightweight dual sport to consider. At over 150 kilos wet, it's almost 160 once you've filled up the tank. It really is a bit too heavy, especially for the tight, twisty stuff. The second thing is that people often point out you can extend the service intervals of the EXC range. And I would agree that yes, you can. Of course, you're going to have to wander out of the warranty possibly. And on top of that, you're never ever going to be able to make it as far as what you can with a dual sport. There's just too much of a gap. And whether it's oil changes, valve checks, or top end rebuilds, none of the schedules can compete with a dual sport, even when you're pushing it. The next argument that I often hear is solid. You can get all this stuff on the aftermarket to turn the 500 EXC into your dream bike. Just do that and quit complaining. And I would say to you, it's an awfully tall order to ask someone to spend $18,000 plus on an enduro motorcycle and then have to basically completely reinvent the motorcycle to get to where you need it to go. That's awfully stressful when you got that much capital tied up in a bike and you don't have that much to throw around to start with. The value really isn't there to convince buyers to jump in. Now, I would pay for a premium motorcycle and I would pay for KTM prices if it had what I wanted. What I'm saying here is I don't want to pay the KTM price and then have to spend thousands more modifying it to get it to where I need to go. Now, I'm happy to accept the regular mods, changing the bars, crash protection, maybe an exhaust, and a few other tweaks for comfort. But when it comes to major engine modifications to get it to where it needs to go, that's when you have to start digging deep into the piggy bank. And for a lot of people, that's just not realistic when they've already spent most of their capital on just getting the KTM to start with. The final argument is usually pointing out a tiny motorcycle manufacturer that makes bespoke motorcycles for a very small segment of the market. It's nothing against them in particular, it's just that they can't fight the economy of scale. Now, I point out to people regularly when they suggest this. Point me to the nearest dealership, usually you can't. And if you can, how long is it going to remain there if the economic environment like it is now getting really difficult? How easy is it to get parts for your bespoke motorcycle, and how expensive are they when you can actually get them? And this is all compounded when we're talking about a bike that's going to have a hard life off-road and often be ridden in remote areas. None of the things that I've discussed there really are conducive to a long-lasting, reliable motorcycle that is going to be easy to find parts when you're broken down in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. Okay, so you spent all this time pie in the sky chin wagging about how you'd love this magical unicorn, but will it ever be made? And how likely is it that we're ever going to see this bike on a showroom floor? And while I will admit that it is fairly unlikely, I do see a path where this bike could make it onto the showroom floor, and it has a bigger chance than you might think. And that's because of emission standards. Now, before you raise your eyebrows in skepticism, hear me out. We all know that emission standards are getting crazy. It doesn't matter what market you're in, even the off-road world, the emission standards are getting tighter and tighter. Now, there is a scenario where the 500 gets so plugged up that they can no longer pedal it as a performance enduro bike. And that means that they would either have to sideline that engine, or they could capitalize on that technology by using that motor as the premium dual sport motor, because we don't need quite the tip of the sword performance. I'm sure most of us would be happy with a 500 EXC-D if it made around 40 horsepower. Admittedly, it is quite a tenuous argument, but it still is in the realm of possibility, and a lot of us can hang our hope on that outcome. Look at it from KTM's side. If you've just been shut down from emissions and you've got a motor sitting there that no longer makes the amount of performance you need, you would obviously want to avoid the loss and pivot into a category where performance isn't such a high priority. The other outcome is by some act of the adventure gods, or maybe my professional complaining on YouTube, KTM actually hears the cries for a premium lightweight dual sport, because they're a bee's dick away with it with the 500 EXC. Hell, even Honda with the CRF 450 RL is almost there. Let me know your thoughts as well. Which manufacturer do you think is in the best position to offer us this premium, lightweight, high specification dual sport? And what kind of specifications would you like to see if you were going to buy this motorcycle? Let me know your thoughts down below. And as always, don't forget to stay shiny side up, and I'll see you in the next one. Catch you later.